Hey guys, welcome back to another Back to Jerusalem podcast. I'm Eugene Bock coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of Sweden. This is a podcast that we usually have in audio format. I will do it sometimes in video format so we can put it on YouTube. But if you want to listen to the audio version of our podcast, and we do a lot more in audio than we ever do in video, just because it's more convenient, you can find that on our website on backtojerusalem.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. This is a special podcast for us because I want to share specifically about a business forum that we are doing this year in October. So October of 2025, we are bringing people from around the world to share specifically how we use business to get missionaries into the area between China and Jerusalem. Not just a way for the missionaries to get visas, but to also provide an income. You know, one of the things that I think that a lot of Christians are a little short-sighted on is how missions will probably take place in the next 10 years and is absolutely essential for missions right now. You know, if you look at the way traditional missions has taken place for the last 2 centuries, basically churches have sent out missionaries to unreached areas of the world and supported them the entire time they're on the mission field. Now we have missionaries that go around to different churches, they go around to different organizations, they raise funding that they need in order to be in those areas. And that is great. That is, if you have a church that is supporting missionaries, keep going. If you are a missionary that is supported by churches, keep going. If you are an individual that has been supporting missionaries, individual missionaries or mission organizations around the world, keep going. I don't want to discourage you from that at all. However, there is a change that has been taking place at least in the last 10 years, and I believe it's going to continue going. And that is the banking system around the world has been used as an apparatus to stop missions, control missions, monitor mission activities, and be a tool used to stop missions from going forward in the most unreached areas of the world. I mean, 10 years ago, if you were a mission organization based in India, let's say, good luck on getting funding to do your mission work in India today. I mean, we see that in China, we see that in North Korea, we see that in Somalia, we see that in Iran. If you want to send mission funding to those areas, it's getting more and more difficult. I remember the days back when I was younger, when banks wanted you to come in. They gave you certain incentives. They wanted you to come and deposit your money into those banks. But now it is so important for day-to-day life to have a bank account that you basically cannot survive without one. In fact, where I'm at right now, it's basically a cashless society. So if you are living and working in Sweden, and you try to use cash in any of the places that you go, they kind of look at you like you are a dirty person if you use cash. Everybody uses a cashless system, whether it's credit cards or Swish or some other form of digital payment. Everything is digitized, so nobody is using cash anymore. At least in this area and many other areas as well. And I was in Germany not too long ago where I went out to eat with some friends and we were sat down and we were having lunch at this pizza place. And all I had was a credit card. I had no cash. I'd been traveling for about like a week in Germany with zero cash, had no problems whatsoever. And it didn't even cross my mind that I should have cash in my wallet. That would not have happened 10 years ago, but especially since COVID, this is one of the things that we received from COVID is a lot of people went cashless. And when they did, that helped create an environment that I believe is not healthy for missions. The reason why is because the banking system really is set up to monitor what you're doing. When I was in Germany and I was eating with my friends and we were about ready to leave, I tried to pay with a card and I couldn't. I needed cash, but I couldn't get cash anywhere. I had to go to the hotel where I was staying and give them US dollars. They gave me, the worker that was there, one of the guys working at the hotel, gave me euros out of his pocket for the US dollars. It was definitely a big challenge for him to do that, but I was so thankful, because at the time there was no ATM in the area. I had no other place to get cash, and I was really kind of having a problem. And that has been the system all around the world, was where I kind of have gotten lazy, like I did in Germany, where I was used to using a credit card everywhere I go, or using my phone for a payment system. And what that has done is it has created a system where the banks are no longer trying to get your business. They now demand that you do certain things. So for instance, if I go to a bank today, or if you go to a bank today and you try to take out, let's say, 10,000 US dollars. 10 years ago, you could go and take out $10,000 and there were no questions asked. I mean, it's your money. It's your bank account. But today, if you take out $10,000, they want to know, why are you taking it out? Where is it going? They got all these questions. It's not your money. It's my money. I'm taking my money out of my account. If I want to put it into a bathtub and swim in it naked, that's my money. I can do that. But that's not the case anymore. Many banks, most banks around the world, now treat their customers as employees. That, for instance, in Dubai, if I send money to our accounts in Dubai, not only do they want to know, how are you going to use that money? Where's that money going to go? Why did it come to your account? All of these different questions. Dubai, if it's a big account that is unusual for a deposit into your account, they now ask, who sent the money and how did the sender get that money? What do I know about the person sending me that? They have money. I wanted some of that money. They agreed to give me some of that money, so they did. It's none of your business, but now they have made it their business. And this system has easily come in and encroached on our lives in the name of convenience, but is now demanding conformity to certain structures that are anti-missionary. These structures that have been put into place by world banks focus completely on controlling money that go into. Now, there's a lot of reasons why they give. They say, well, this is anti-money laundering laws. These are anti-terrorist laws. This keeps money from going into terrorist groups. This keeps money from going into for fraudulent uses. This keeps money. There's all these different reasons that are given for why money is being used, or why money is being controlled by the banks. And you just have to conform. I've been fired by banks, believe it or not, by using money in an inappropriate way in different countries. Let's say, because I work in North Korea, I work in Iran, I work in China. And so banks that are worried about the kind of work that we have done in North Korea, Iran, China, they have fired me, meaning that they would no longer allow me to have a bank account at their bank because of my work in those areas. This has created a problem for traditional missions. So if you are doing mission work, like you've been doing, like we have all been doing for the last 200 years, where you send out a missionary to a place like China, like a place like India, like wherever in the world, and then your church or your mission organization or your organization sends money to those workers, or for Bible printing or for evangelist training, whatever it is that you are doing to further the gospel in unreached areas, your work is greatly restricted, more now than ever before in the history of man, by banks. Banks, in many ways, is the number one enemy to missions. This is why the business forum that we host, like we're doing in October, if you have not signed up for our Back to Jerusalem business forum that we are doing in Northwest Arkansas, if you're not familiar with Northwest Arkansas, this is the place where Walmart and a lot of the conglomerates that work around that kind of industry are based. So we are in the heartland of regular business, and we are using business as a vehicle in the way that the first century church did. One of the amazing benefits that I have had for the last 25 years of my life is working together with the underground church in China. And in the last 25 years, I've been able to witness the church in China use not the traditional format of mission organizations or the traditional vehicle of having a society or an NGO, as we often do in the West. You know, in the West, in places like America and Europe or Canada, Australia, you can set up an NGO to do a lot of different Christian work. And in fact, most churches operate tax-free in nations in the West where Christianity has been the backbone of those societies. But that system is quietly and quickly eroding, where churches that used to have a certain amount of trust in the society is now being targeted and scrutinized by governments and by banks. So the way of doing traditional missions, where churches have been able to send funding to their workers, to their missionaries, to their projects in the field, that the banking system and government system has come in between and made a slice to break up the system that has been in place for many years. And I believe this is a strategy of the enemy during end times. You may not agree with me. Much of what I'm saying here, you may not completely agree with, but the thing that you cannot disagree with is doing missions today is much different than it was just 10 years ago in terms of banking, as well as registration for NGOs or nonprofit organizations that operate as Christian charities. Though that whole world has changed. It has changed really quickly. A lot of that has to do with the influx of Islam, the support of terrorism, and a lot of money laundering that has been taking place in the banking systems after 9/11. So even though those have been legitimate excuses, they have been a double-edged sword, specifically targeting Christians. And I hope this makes sense, because what I'm about to say next is built on that idea that because it is so difficult to do missions in the traditional way that we have done before, if you are a church or you're a charity or you're an NGO and you have been working in closed countries before, 10 years ago, I think that you had a relatively easier time than what you have now. I think that's across the board. I don't think there's too many people that can disagree with that. What we see now is a need to learn from the underground church. What we see now, I believe, is a need to learn from the first century church, where we saw that businesses in the New Testament, as well as businesses in the underground church, not just in China. We see this in North Korea. We see this in Iran. We see this in Yemen. We see this in Somalia. We see this in Sudan and many other nations that are considered to be highly restrictive for preaching the gospel. Business becomes a top platform. Doing mission work today, together with business, fits so naturally. By watching the Underground House Church, what I have learned is that there is something special about the natural engagement of people when you are a business person versus a missionary. Let me give you an example. In the early days when I specifically worked with evangelists, going into closed areas or unreached people groups, villages of unreached people groups, one of the things that I often saw was these techniques and training tools that were used to just start a basic conversation with an unbeliever. And it felt so unnatural. Maybe you've had a different experience, but sometimes it feels so unnatural to start a conversation, to build up a relationship, and know that you don't have the language, you don't have the culture, you don't have the background. There's no kind of connection between the two of you, for lack of a better word. So you almost have to formulate one. You almost have to create one. And sometimes it feels a little bit made up, a little bit contrived, a little bit too formulaic. But with business, relationships come really naturally. You have a service or an item or funding and you're wanting to purchase, or somebody's wanting to purchase from you. And you naturally build relationships, working relationships with individuals who are not believers. So from a ministry standpoint, business relationships are very natural. Also, we see in the first century church, as well as with the underground church, that there is an easy platform that is established that helps provide in our case, visas, but also income and general support for families, evangelists, missionaries, and pastors without having to rely on funding coming from donations forever. A family that feels called, a person, a missionary that feels called to uproot their lives in one location and move to another location can easily support themselves, or more naturally support themselves, through business. And there doesn't have to be that dichotomy of business and life where the two of them have to be separated. Or we've often been taught this idea of separation of church and state, which comes from the American Western mentality. And because we have that separation of church and state, we also separate the carnal and the spiritual, the business and the church, the ministry and daily life, government and religion. Like all of those things, we create this separation, this dichotomy, which is not natural, not biblical, not a part of the first century church, and definitely not a part of the underground church of today. So just by watching the Chinese underground church use business as a vehicle to support their missionaries, to get their missionaries into closed nations and sustain them over long periods of time to do ministry, and the impact those businesses have led me to host many Back to Jerusalem business seminars like the forum that we are hosting in Arkansas, October of this year. We would love for you to come and join us. Right now, we have an opening that's still available. And for those that sign up with our business forum, we have a brand new book that's coming out in October that we will provide the ebook for all of the attendees. It is the 9 contrarian principles of starting businesses in closed countries. I've been asked many times. Years ago, I was asked to write a book about how to start a business in a closed country, and I refused to do that. The reason I refused to do that for more than 2 decades is because, to be honest, I don't know how. I start anywhere from 2 businesses to 10 businesses per year. Half of them fail, half of them succeed, and I can't tell you why. I refuse to give a step-by-step guide on how to start a successful business, because every successful business that I have ever started has happened by accident. I've just kind of fallen in to a situation with people and scenarios and support that was all kind of predestined and arranged by God. And so I can't take credit for it, nor can I give a step-by-step guide. I'm reminded of the Jewish commander that was teaching in an American war school about their success during the 6-Day War. And when he was asked to teach the strategies that were used during the 6-Day War, he said, "I can't." And when he was asked why, the Israeli commander said, "Because miracles are not a strategy." They're not. They're just where God chooses to breathe. However, even though I cannot tell you exactly how to start a successful business, I can give you 9 contrarian principles for the foundation of every successful business that I have seen on the field run by the Underground House Church. These are 9 biblical contrarian principles. And why do I call them contrarian principles? Because what I have seen in closed countries, when you start a business on the mission field, there's no business school that can teach you what you need to know. There's no book that is written. There's no course that you can take. There's no degree that you can have that will prepare you. In fact, I would say that if you have gone through business school, if you've started businesses in the West, in America, in Europe, if you have gone through a course or you have taught courses on how to start businesses, you are at a disadvantage of starting businesses, successful businesses in closed nations. There's a reason why we don't see big corporations doing financially well in Iran, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan. You know, whenever these big corporations, whenever these big companies come in and do an investment, they have to make sure that they have their ROI, their return on investment. And in order to calculate their ROIs, their return on investment, they have to be able to set a plan in place for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road to make sure that every penny that they're putting in today will come back to them in multiple folds in the future. And that can't happen in certain closed countries. I mean, you don't know what the next hour is going to look like in Somalia, let alone next year, 5 years. You're going to put together a 20-year plan for Somalia for doing business, and good luck on that one. It's not going to happen. So all of those books that you have studied on starting a business, all of those magazines, all of those courses that you have taken, rip them up, throw them out. They do you no good in closed nations. What does work? How can you use business as mission in closed nation? How can you calculate what you need to be able to start a business in a place like Iran, North Korea, even China? What tools, what courses, what schools can you go to? I believe that the best school of all is to sit at the feet of the underground church that's been doing it for generations, doing it quite naturally in the same way that the first century church is recorded as doing in the Gospels. There are certain principles that are the foundations of doing Christian business as mission in closed nations that are taught in the Bible. I call them the 9 contrarian principles. The reason I call them the 9 contrarian principles is because they go against everything that you think that you know. The Bible has a way of doing that. The Bible has a way of teaching ideas and principles that completely go against everything that we think we know. They contradict human teaching, human thought, rational ideas. They contradict what is being taught in academia. I mean, the Bible's riddled with contradictory teachings. You have to be poor to be rich. If you want to be first, you have to be last. If you want to lead, you have to follow. If you want to have life, you have to die. Like all of these things that Jesus taught to his disciples contradicted everything that they thought they knew. In fact, if you know something and you know it with all your heart because you've had experience in the business world, that can actually be a hindrance to you doing business as mission in closed countries. I remember for me, my background is in the U.S. Marine Corps. And I remember the anxiety that I had when I first went into basic training. Because I had no backup plan. I knew that if I did not make it in the Marine Corps, I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to go. I had no plan B. And so I was desperate to complete my training in the U.S. Marine Corps. And so when I was in the Marines, I remember going through second phase where you learn how to shoot. And I thought to myself, here I will teach people how good I am. See, I grew up with weapons. I grew up with guns. I was always going out and hunting. I went hunting with my grandfather and my stepfather. I went out by myself. I was always shooting. I was a pretty good shooter for, my area. Whenever I was out with my friends or with my family, I was kind of this not expert, but definitely better than the average Joe. I was somebody that could hit my target, if not on the first try, at least on the second try. Whether I'm shooting for rabbit, a small game, or deer. And I'm used to shooting with a 12 gauge shotgun, which basically, it comes out of the barrel in a very tight formation and then spreads out the further it goes. And so basically, if you can't hit a shot with a 12 gauge shotgun, at such close ranges, I didn't realize that you didn't need to be a good shooter. At that time, I thought that I was a good shooter because the weapon was made very well. So when I got into the Marine Corps, I thought that I was better than I was. I had experience, and the experience worked against me. So much so that I didn't listen to anything that the instructors taught me because I knew better than them. I was going to show them. Wait until they saw how good I was. They gave me my M16. I sat down at the firing line to set the dope on my weapon, which is what you say when you're setting your sights. So I'm zeroing in on my target, and I take the first couple of shots. Nobody can help me arrange my sights because nobody knows where I'm shooting. I'm so far away from the target that nobody even knows how to walk me onto the target. Nobody knows how to set the dials on my weapon because I'm nowhere close to the target. The very first range week, I go belly up. I can't hit in the Marine Corps, you have to go from 200 yards, 300 yards, and 500 yards. So you go the furthest with the M16 rifle than anybody else. The distance of accuracy at the furthest range on the M16A2 service rifle is 550 yards. We shoot it at 500. So it's almost at the complete distance. And this was with iron sights. So you are at the very limit of that weapon's ability. So you have to be good. You have to be precise. You have to do exactly what the instructors told you to do. But my problem was I had no clue what the instructors told me to do. So I was nowhere even close. What I had to do was I prayed, because if you fail the shooting section, you fail boot camp. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I went through a remedial course the following week. While all of my classmates went on, me and a few other people, we were held back because we were so bad. I was the worst of them all. Out of I think 500 Marines or whatever it was, I was the worst. I was at the very, very bottom, far at the bottom. At that time, I listened to everything they taught me. I had to forget everything I thought I knew. I had to pretend that I'd never touched a weapon before. That was the best instruction that I'd ever received from a Marine Corps drill instructor, was forget everything that you think you knew. No, you're starting from scratch. Completely clear your mind of every item of information that is lingering on, because it will cause you problems in the future, because what you know is wrong. What you know is wrongly understood, and it will impact your inability to ever hit the target. I have found the same in business on the mission field, that everything that I think I know about business because I read some book or I went to some course or I studied some leadership course from some big guru at some point in time, I have found that that information is absolutely worthless on the mission field. In closed countries, it's different rules. In closed countries, it is the Wild West. in only the principles that God has given to his people in his word, as well as through the guidance of the Holy Spirit through his church, will be able to sustain you when it comes to business in closed countries to do mission work. And that is where we get the 9 contrarian principles of business that we have in a brand new book that will be out in October, that we were giving it for free to those that sign up and attend the Back to Jerusalem course, the Back to Jerusalem Business Forum. At the Business Forum, we are going to be sharing exactly how to start businesses in closed countries using these 9 principles. Not only that, I am going to be bringing individuals from China, Iran, India, North Korea to tell you exactly how they have done it, how they are doing it, how you can join them today. Or they will give you the elements of how they got started so that you too can get started if you don't want to work with anybody that is at the course that we will be sharing. When I look at the 9 contrarian principles, I feel that this is probably one of the most essential elements of starting a business to complete the Great Commission. Because as I said earlier in this podcast, the future of missions is married to business. It is integrated with business. Now, there'll be mission organizations and mission work and missionaries that will have nothing to do with business. But the future of the majority of business, the majority of mission work is going to be using business, whether you like it or not. The traditional way that the world has developed in the last 200 years of doing mission work, those days are slowly coming to an end, if not changing. They've already changed forever. Whenever I talk about the 9 contrarian principles, I'm quickly reminded of a special verse. I've shared it several times with our listeners at the during our Back to Jerusalem podcast. It's what I like to call the darkest verse in the Bible. It's the only time we see the verse 666 in the New Testament. John chapter 6, verse 66. It's the darkest verse, I believe, because it is there that we see that the disciples abandon Jesus. Now, when people think of the disciples, they always think of the 12 disciples that followed Jesus, but Jesus had many more disciples than just the 12. Many people began to follow him and his teachings up until John chapter 6. In John chapter 6, Jesus began to go say things that went against their understanding. They had previous understandings that kept them from receiving exactly what it was that Jesus wanted to say. The future that Jesus had for his disciples was wrapped in this teaching that was contrary to everything that they had already been exposed to. And because of their previous teachings that were contrary to what Jesus was saying, they had to choose. And many of them chose to leave Jesus. I'm just going to read from John chapter 6. I'm going to start with verse 60 really quick. It says this: when many of his disciples heard it, they said, "This is a hard saying. Who can listen to it?" They're talking about Jesus saying crazy stuff about eating my flesh and drinking my blood. This is completely different than anything they'd ever heard from the rabbis, anything they'd ever read in the Torah. Verse 61, but Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, said to them, "Do you take offense to this? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But there are some of you who do not believe." For Jesus knew some from the beginning, those who did not believe, who it was who would betray him. And he said, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted to him by the Father." Verse 66. After this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. Did Jesus try to stop them? Did Jesus try to say, wait, guys, before you leave, wait, this is a complete misunderstanding. Stay, just wait just for a minute. Let me re-explain myself in a way that's more culturally relevant so that you'll stay with me. Nope. He looked at his disciples that stayed and said, are you not going to go as well? And I love their answer. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. The Back to Jerusalem Business as Mission Forum is exactly that. A group of men and women who come to the understanding that when it comes to business as mission on the mission field, I don't understand how to do it. I need the leading of the Holy Spirit. I need the guiding of Jesus' words through his New Testament. All of the world's teachings go against what Jesus says. All of the world's understanding go against where the Spirit is leading. If you want to make money, if you want to start a successful business, you need to go to New York, go to London, go to Paris, go anywhere else. You don't go to North Korea to make money with business. But when God tells you to go and you don't understand, when God says, I want you to go and preach the gospel in Iran, even though it's not legal, even though it's not allowed, even though no church will support you, even though no organization has the right or the ability through banking, through laws, through whatever to support you. And it doesn't make sense. And everybody else leaves. And it's just you and Christ standing there. And you hear the words of Jesus. It says, will you not leave as well? The Business as Mission Back to Jerusalem Forum is a group of men and women that repeat the words of Peter and say, where else can we go? You have the words of life. You are the blessed Holy One. What you just said, we don't understand. What you just said contradicts everything that the rest of the world teaches. These 9 contrarian principles of what is laid out for business in God's word goes against everything you will get in today's business schools, books, teachings, writings. But if you follow these 9 principles, they give you the best likelihood of survival in closed nations. Those 9 contrarian principles we lay out and teach in detail, not just in theory, but in practice. Guys, I'm not a person that is a business guru. I start a lot of businesses. Some of them fail, some of them do not. But what I have learned has been through observation, through doing, through practical application, through good old-fashioned on-the-job training. That's how I learn. And that's how we share. Nobody's coming to this forum to teach that is not currently involved in doing business in closed nations. Like I said, we have people coming from China, India, Iran, North Korea. You will never hear testimonies, stories, and principles like the ones at this next Back to Jerusalem Business as Mission Forum. We would love for you to be there October of this year. If you can't be there, the book will be out that we're teaching these 9 contrarian principles. The book will be out in October later of this year. I pray that you get it. Thank you so much for joining us for another Back to Jerusalem podcast, whether you're on our website or on YouTube or wherever else you're listening to this podcast. I pray that it is a blessing. Again, I'm Eugene Bock, your host for this time, coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of Sweden. God bless you.